In 1963, a 23-year-old black Brazilian kid walked into a Philips studio in Rio de Janeiro with a song that wasn't quite samba, wasn't quite bossa nova, and wasn't quite anything anyone had a name for yet. The chorus was built on a phrase he borrowed from Afro-Brazilian street language. Mas que nada, o aria raio, oba, oba, oba. 3 years later, that exact song became the first track ever sung in Portuguese to land on the American Billboard Hot 100. 40 years after that, Will.i.am and the Black Eyed Peas pulled it out of the vault, put it back on global radio, and took it to #1 in 2 different countries. You've heard this song your whole life. You have probably hummed the chorus without ever knowing a single thing about the kid who wrote it. On this channel, I dig into the stories behind Brazilian music, the songs that conquered the world, the artists who invented whole genres, the pieces of the global pop puzzle that everyone knows but almost nobody can name. Brazil gave the planet bossa nova, tropicalia, carnaval, samba, the clave that travels through half of modern hip-hop. If that kind of rabbit hole is your thing, hit subscribe and stick with me. We go deep. Let's set the scene. The kid I'm talking about is Jorge Duilio Lima Menezes, Jorge Ben, later Jorge Ben Hor. By 1963, he was playing at the Beco das Garrafas in Copacabana, a cluster of tiny clubs where the whole bossa nova generation came up. But Jorge Ben wasn't really bossa nova. His left hand on the guitar had a different kind of pulse, heavier, looser, black, with the swing of a samba school and the forward drive of what Americans were starting to call soul. Philips signed him and released his debut album, Samba Esquema Novo, Samba in a New Scheme. That title was the whole thesis. He wasn't copying the Copacabana elite, he was opening a door. Track 1, side 1 was Mas que Nada, just him, his acoustic guitar, a small rhythm section, and a chorus that sounds like a block party shouting back at him. The words are almost untranslatable on purpose. Mas que nada means something like, yeah, right, or come on now. And the rest of the hook, oba, 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 is a Yoruba greeting that lives inside Brazilian candomblé. This was a 23-year-old black kid putting African Brazil right in the middle of a pop single. The record sold in Brazil, Jorge Ben became a name, and if the story had ended there, this would be a very different video. But on the other side of the hemisphere, a Brazilian piano player named Sergio Mendes had just signed with a new label called A&M Records. A&M had been built by a trumpet player named Herb Alpert, who had made a fortune selling a slightly fake version of Mexico to middle-class Americans, the Tijuana Brass Records. Alpert had an ear for what Americans would accept as exotic, without pushing them too far out of their comfort zone. He had also just heard a young American singer in Chicago named Lani Hall. He flew her to Los Angeles, introduced her to Sergio, and told them to build a group around her voice. The group became Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. Sergio on piano, Lani Hall and Janice Hansen on lead vocals, a Brazilian rhythm section behind them. Their very first album, Herb Alpert Presents Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66, came out that year. Track 1 was a cover of a song Sergio had heard back in Rio, a song by this kid Jorge Ben. They kept the Portuguese chorus. Lani Hall, who didn't speak Portuguese, learned the words phonetically. Herb Alpert produced it like an American pop single, clean, punchy, bright, and radio-friendly in a way the original never tried to be. And then American radio did something nobody predicted. Stations in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago started playing it. Kids who had never heard a word of Portuguese in their lives were singing Oba, 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 along with the car radio. By October 1966, Mas que Nada peaked at number 47 on the Billboard Hot 100 and climbed all the way to number 4 on the easy listening chart. That number 47 looks small. It isn't. It is the first song in the history of the Billboard Hot 100 sung entirely in Portuguese. No Carmen Miranda crossover, no English translation. A Brazilian chorus on American Top 50 radio in 1966. A year before rock would even fully arrive in Brazil. The album went on to sell more than 1 million copies in the United States. Sergio Mendes became, for a generation of Americans, what Brazilian music sounded like. Herb Alpert and A&M built a whole world pop catalog on the back of that sound. Before anyone had invented the term world music, The Grammy Hall of Fame would induct that first Brazil '66 album in 2011. Lani Hall eventually married Herb Alpert. Sergio kept making records. And Jorge Ben, back in Rio, kept writing. He would later write Taj Mahal, the riff that Rod Stewart accidentally copied into "Do You Think I'm Sexy?" But that is another video. Here's the quiet part. Jorge Ben wrote the song. Jorge Ben recorded it first. Jorge Ben's arrangement. Jorge Ben's chorus. Jorge Ben's African Brazil poured into 3.5 minutes. And then 2 Americans and 1 other Brazilian figured out how to translate his work for a market that didn't know his name. Sergio and Herb became the American face of the song, while Jorge Ben stayed, in the US at least, a name on a publishing credit. For 40 years, millions of listeners hummed his melody without knowing he existed, which is why 2006 matters. Sergio Mendes had just signed with Will.i.am, the producer behind the Black Eyed Peas. Will.i.am grew up on samples of Mas Que Nada. He talked Sergio into recording an album called Timeless, full of reinventions of his own 60s catalog with hip-hop artists. Track 1, again, was Mas Que Nada, this time with Will.i.am, Fergie, and the Black Eyed Peas on the hook. The song went to number 1 in Hungary, number 1 in the Netherlands, number 6 in the United Kingdom, and back into heavy rotation in the United States. Suddenly, the kids dancing at weddings in 2006 were singing the same chorus their grandparents had sung in 1966, a chorus a black Brazilian kid wrote when he was 23. Sergio Mendes passed away in 2024. Jorge Ben is still alive in Rio. The song is still playing in a cafe somewhere in the world right now. Mas Que Nada is one of the rare pieces of pop music that has been covered, sampled, and rebuilt for 6 straight decades. And underneath every single version is a kid from the Beco das Garrafas with a nylon string guitar, a Yoruba chant in the chorus, and a quiet refusal to sound like anyone else. Brazil didn't just send a song to Billboard in 1966. Brazil sent a whole different rhythmic grammar, and it never really left. If you want the full arc on this, go watch my video on Jorge Ben and Rod Stewart, or my video on Sergio Mendes. The story keeps branching. Click on the video on your screen right now, hit the bell so you get every new episode, and I'll see you in the next one.